Hello, everyone. This is Melly Manko, and I'm here with a friend, a colleague, and also my co host, Jesse Bartko. This is Job Hoppers. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2. I think Jesse can agree with me when I say that it's definitely feels good to get the first one under your belt. You know what I mean? And just kind of get feedback from friends and colleagues and Mamba, as you can see, my puppy that just opened the door. But we're happy to have you guys. I mean, we've gotten some good feedback as to the topics we want to touch base with and kind of how we'd like to run the show moving forward.
And I think the biggest thing that we kind of decided on is we're a little too sort of, I guess, clean cut, formal. It's right now it's 3:00 on a Friday. Our office closed at 2. And we're ready for the weekend, and we want you guys to feel as though we're not business professionals trying to dump everything on you. So we're gonna go ahead and open our drinks, and hang out with you guys. Really, I mean, this is our opinions, our advice, our thoughts and research on the workforce today, and in this crazy sort of, I guess, fourth industrial revolution almost, where we're moving to the technology age fully. It can get kind of confusing and kind of crazy. So why not relax a little bit with it?
Yeah, totally. Jess, what are you drinking over there?
I'm a big cheap beer guy, as weird as that sounds.
Okay.
Growing up, or not really growing up, because underage drinking is bad. When my first beer I ever had was a Bud Heavy. And I told my mom that when because I was at school, I moved into school for my 21st birthday. And when I told her that, she almost fainted. She was like, "Why would you drink a 50-cent beer?" And I'm like, "Well, that's all I could afford at the time." So I've stuck with it, honestly. Labatt Blue. I'm living up in Erie, Pennsylvania now, close to Canada. We get Labatt Blue, and it's honestly the best cheap beer around. And I use a little thing called beer salt twang.
Whoa!
Don't use it on every.
Not a plug.
No. Sponsor us, maybe. I don't know. But not using it on every single sip I take, because then your salt consumption would probably jump through the roof. But it adds a little flavor, a little twang, as they say.
Nice. I love that.
What about you?
Too. So I'm usually very simple, like a nice glass of wine will do me, but today I felt a little spicy. So I made a Moscow Mule. I think it's good. Just a little ginger beer, some Sky vodka, some lime. I think that's all you need. It's like super refreshing, and it's kind of bringing me back after this long week, and to set us up well for episode 2.
Awesome. Love to see it. And Mel, what are we going to talk about today?
Sure. So today's topic, which was actually brought up by our market director, Hannah, who is amazing, but we really want to touch on promotions with this remote type of environment. So there's been a lot of studies done, and one that Jess and I have actually been looking into is a study that Slack created. They have like their own system called Forum that they create surveys for and things like that. But it's essentially like leveling the playing field in a hybrid workplace. What does an employee who chooses to, pursue a fully remote work environment, right? What does their career trajectory look like compared to someone who has dedicated 5 days in office, right? And the individual who does choose to go in office, will they be able to build more of a connection with their manager? Will they be given more assignments, right? Because they're easily accessible. Like you can physically see that they're in their desk. Maybe they come by in your office and ask for more work, right? And what does it mean long-term?
Mamba says that having a dog helps get a promotion, I think.
Yeah, if anyone has a puppy, this dog comes to me at like 4:00 on the dot every day and asks to go outside. So I don't really know what to do, but suggestions definitely help. But yeah, that's the topic we'd like to discuss. this week. And of course, as always, we always love your feedback and as much insight as possible. But we want to try and give this information to candidates who might feel like they're falling behind, right, compared to other colleagues. And we want to kind of draw the similarities between, okay, well, what types of demographics do the people come from that do choose a hybrid environment versus the demographics of those who go in office full time?
And I think that is one of the most interesting sort of statistics. And Mel, I know you have the fine numbers in front of you, but the importance of a workplace that is virtual and being promoted in it is much different than it was, I guess, at this point, we're in 2022, 3 years ago, when we were all in, when there was no question really of remote work versus in office. And I think that, it's much different when you're sitting in a meeting room, a boardroom, whatever it might be, or a conference room, or at your desk in a row of cubicles. I think that, there's much less, I guess, tangibility of your work when it's in a remote force. So being present, being involved, and these are all things we're going to touch on today, plays so much more of a key than the actual hard skills and the product you're producing.
Right, exactly. And I think that, companies, and we've seen this month over month, just in the current year, that the remote job opportunities are pretty stable within the accounting and finance field. I think in more tech related positions, you'll see even a higher number of remote roles. But I think the big winner here is hybrid, right? Where you're given the flexibility to go in every day, but maybe some weeks are a little more difficult and you need to work from home, which is totally fine. But like, who are these people, right? And so Future Forum by Slack, and we'll be putting the links to these studies as well, essentially stated that the majority of those who are at a disadvantage are essentially women, parents, people of color, and those are the groups where employers now have to think about inequity, right? And trying to level out the playing field and what that means for companies moving forward, giving opportunities to women, to people of color, and to the people that might be at a disadvantage because they need to be staying home with family or they're the only ones that can. So I think it's really interesting to kind of dig into, okay, well, if it is going to be a hybrid environment, or if you do need to work fully remote, like what are the steps you need to take to progress your career, right? And I think that it really starts out with kind of going back to our quiet quitting discussion, right? Being present, showing up. Okay. So if you feel like you're at a place where your responsibilities and challenges have almost plateaued, like you need to proactively reach out to your manager, a colleague, just saying like, hey, look, I feel very comfortable in this field, but like, these are the things I'm interested in. Do you think you can connect me with another department that handles them? Do you think that there's any projects I can work with that will give me exposure to these items? Like, be present and be vocal, because especially if you're not full-time in office, like Teams, calling people on their cells, like these are vital to try and move you up in the employment period.
And there's a big difference between, and this may sound kind of strange, especially coming from a 20-something-year-old, there's a big difference between picking up the phone and calling someone and sending a Teams message, sending a text message, sending an email. Those are the things that are going to set you apart from someone else in your department. If you're the type of person that sits on your computer, oh, I don't know what to do, let me message my manager, then you're sitting there for maybe, 10, 15, 20, who knows how long minutes, and no response, still no progress on your work. Meanwhile, problem could be solved. Pick up the phone, call the manager. All right, manager's in a meeting. Pick up the phone, call someone else. And you'll be able to sort of identify, solve, and then resolve the problem a lot quicker. Just by a simple phone call or Teams call or whatever software you use, rather than sending that message, waiting, the delay. That's going to push your work so much further in a remote situation. And that's the type of thing that stands out to managers, not only showing face in meetings, but showing face outside of meetings, in the sense where when you call your manager, you're on camera. I exclusively use video call on Teams unless it's a non-urgent issue. Then I can send a message and wait for a reply.
Exactly. And I think that kind of coupled going along with that, right? Like building your presence, even if it's in a remote sense, is super important. Our director Hannah made a good point, right? You have to build your presence even on LinkedIn, right? Be present, post articles that you're interested in, just so your company can know that you're like engaged and learning more and exploring and everything like that. And also kind of like building your presence internally within your company, where your colleagues know like, oh, Jesse knows this shit. Like, I'm going to go to him for these types of things. Or like, Mel's good at these specific things. Like, I'm going to go to Mel, right? Even if she's not in the office, like I know she'll pick up my call. And kind of like getting yourself involved in like groups, right? If your company offers them. I know Block, right? Square, they have like these communities for every single type of hobby or background. Like they have groups for people who like to play tennis. Like you could talk to your colleagues about tennis, or they have groups for Latin heritage or African American heritage. And I think that like the more you feel connected, right, and the more that you're engaged, the more that the companies will really prioritize promotions just based on performance. And I think that kind of from a company perspective, right? Like what can they do to ensure that there is equality across demographics, right? They can maybe set a standard where promotions are solely based on KPIs, right? Numbers. I think it's more common for like sales positions and things like that. But maybe they could even pay for your commute into work, right? So like just kind of some flexibility, not even from the employee side, but you also need to think about like different options as a hiring manager or an executive of a company to how to accommodate these people so that there isn't any inequality amongst. So.
Right. And as a hiring manager, I think you need to be mindful of the opportunities you're giving your employees to be involved and making sure that they have all the opportunities to be engaged and a true member of the community. Because at the end of the day, your company is a community. You take everything else aside, demographic, geographics, especially in a remote setting, and you break it down to the simplest form, that is everyone works for the same company. And building that identity of I work for XYZ company and I'm proud of that. That is so important. And the people that are proud of that often go further within the company. It's not, oh, I work for XYZ company. They're okay. They're good. I like it, or whatever it is. It's I work for XYZ company and I'm part of that community that talks about tennis. My friends and I, we send each other videos all the time of tennis or whatever it is, you know, within that community. For me, it's pickleball. I'm not very good at tennis. So a lot different there, but you know, being able to be involved not only in your local sort of office, for lack of a better expression, but involved in the company as a national company, especially when you look at these bit larger companies. And of course, if you work for a smaller company, being involved within that, because 9 times out of 10, at least what we've seen, is the smaller companies aren't hiring remote workers from across the country. Right. That just doesn't make sense for them. Those people don't relate to their core values. They're, you know, if they want to have an outing or whatever it is. And as much as those, you know, company outings are optional, I think being able to show up to them, even if you're, you know, if you're comfortable, that speaks numbers to, you know, you pushing forward through the ladder almost, or up the ladder of promotions.
Yeah, and kind of going off that, right? So I don't know if we touched on this, but Jesse and I handle all level accounting and finance positions, right? So staff all the way up through controller, CFO. And what we see is that the higher the level of the position, if it's an FP&A director, if it's a CFO, the more likely that they will need to report into the office. Okay, so what does that mean, right? If you are a controller or right at the point of kind of like transitioning into more of like a C-suite level, VP, SVP level position, and they are requiring you to go into the office, right? But you've been kind of performing phenomenally at home, taking care of your kids, right? Completing everything that's been done. Like, what does that mean for the people that are looking to transition into the executive positions, especially if like a lot of companies might just want leadership there to quote unquote, like show face, right? Even if most of their employees that report to them are remote, right? Or hybrid or have that flexibility, like, what does it mean for executives or VPs to have to like show face or come in 3-4 days in office, which is pretty standard for what we're seeing in positions right now?
I think that, C-suite executives or managers should really be the ones setting the tone. Now, of course, there is that whole return to office push that's coming from higher ups. And the issue that's coming about is a lot of the manager level people, controllers, managers of FP&A, at least in our industry, are pushing back. And they're advocating for their employees. And there will be a breaking point at some point, and I don't know what it's going to be. There's this whole like secret war going on in the workforce that people are kind of talking about, but also kind of ignoring because it's a touchy subject that no one wants to go back in the office, but also companies want people back in the office, and who is that actually coming from? But I think, in order to move up the ladder, you just kind of have to roll with the punches, whatever it may be. And, if a company is requiring return to office, if you want to move up within that company and that company is something you want to devote your career to, go back in office. If that's the company for you. If it's not the company for you and you don't feel at home and you want to stay home, or you want to, maybe transition to a different company, then that's the time to, and it's okay. And if you speak with your manager candidly about your feelings and everything like that, I think that 9 times out of 10, they'll at least hear you out, and they'll try for a resolution first before there's a, parting of ways.
Yeah. And I think that like we can go through some of the steps that we believe would like resolve this issue with promotions in a type of hybrid or remote work environment. And like the first is like really building trust through transparent communication through and through. A study showed that, let me see the numbers. So I guess 72% of executives believe that they're being transparent, while 47% of employees agree to that, right? So the employees aren't really seeing that transparency from their leadership. And I think that it's not necessarily their fault. You have to think that executives in their position now have been in office full time for well over a decade, right? That's what they know. And I think a lot of the times in leadership positions, especially if you're managing a large team, it's really hard to pivot and shift to leading professionals online, through Teams, going through progress or like quarterly updates or kind of like weekly check-ins with your employees all through Teams. And so you can just see by that percentage, right? It's not being translated. Like employees don't feel that sense of trust, which leads to turnover. It leads to them being open for work, which that could be a whole other discussion. But a lot of candidates who are happy with their jobs, they're open to work on LinkedIn, right? That little click that you put on your profile, all us recruiters can see that you're open to work, right? And when we call and you say, you know what, it's a great company, I love my team, but I'm passively looking. Okay, well, what does that mean? Why are you passively looking? And a lot of the times people don't really get that sense of security, or they don't see longevity or any promotions in the future. So I think that like, it's not necessarily management or executives or VP's fault, but it's something that they really need to recognize and kind of do better with, right? And everyone's learning this remote hybrid work is new to everyone. So I think that as long as they try and work on building the trust with their employees, they'll see much more company, not even company loyalty, but loyalty to you, right? If you were to move to another company, you know that they would kind of be interested in moving with you possibly, or that sort of thing. But what do you think about that, Jess?
I think, the main thing to sort of start with is remote work has been around for longer than a lot of people think. I know plenty of parents of my friends growing up that worked remotely, for large companies. IBM was a big start. I think Cisco started all those tech companies, probably because they had the facilities to allow for remote work. But nowadays, anyone with a laptop can work anywhere, in my opinion. I don't think it requires that much unless you're doing some crazy data intensive, pushing a computer to its max kind of thing.
It's the dual monitors for me. The dual monitors are a luxury that people with single monitors don't understand. You know what I mean?
Easy fix though. Easy fix for a company. If the main reason, take some monitors out of the office and maybe move some to the home office. I don't know. But I think that, the prior to COVID, remote work was kind of a luxury for C-suite executives, higher up managers, independent contractors, or really, those sort of niche jobs where it's just one guy in a department kind of thing, or one woman in a department.
Sure.
But now, with full departments being remote, it's really on both the employee and the manager to stay engaged, stay involved, be present, work your way up through that corporate ladder, because this could be the future of work for all we know. In 20 years, maybe there won't even be offices. I don't know. No one knows. Mm-hmm. That's part of the issue.
Right.
And I think that moving up within a company really relies on yourself and your motivation. And, when you look at a work from home day, it can start at 6 a.m. and end at 3 p.m. if you're, an 8-hour employee. If you're a sales employee, it could start at 6 a.m. and end at 6 p.m. Who knows? That's the thing. When you cut out the commute from a lot of these roles, people are able to be a lot more focused and a lot more driven during the day. Now, of course, are they fully engaged for the entire day? Probably not. Let's just be honest here that, you'll get up from your computer when you're working remotely and check the mail, vacuum your living room, whatever it might be. But those are small little breaks that you would have taken anyway if you were in the office. And I think that the argument goes against remote workers when you see that quiet quitting that we talked about last week, where they're just kind of signing on and leaving their computer on all day and then playing video games or sitting on the couch watching TV, whatever it may be. And I think that, those people who do that kind of thing after, as we spoke about last week, after they've sort of assessed everything internally and externally, need to make the decision of if they can or can't work remotely for their career. Because honestly, in some cases, you can work remotely for your entire life and sit in the same position. But if you went in office, maybe you would work your way up that ladder. And you need to make that decision for yourself. If you're comfortable in your spot, you like what you do, you're comfortable with the money, you're comfortable being from home, that's okay. And that's totally fine. You just need to make sure that you're not trying as hard as you can to climb the ladder in a role where you're not going to because you're not in office and everyone else is.
Right, exactly. And I think that a big thing is I feel like as an employee, right? Like maybe definitely entry, mid, even senior level, right? Kind of before it gets to managerial director level, you feel the obligation to prove to your manager while you're remote, right? Working from home, that you're being productive, right? Like you feel, you have this sense of, okay, well, I need to make sure that they know that I'm doing my job well, right? And on the flip side, I think that it's kind of like it's like a relationship. It's not up to the employees to try and necessarily like fight for promotion. They have to kind of meet halfway with the executives and the VPs making these hiring decisions. And those executives and VPs have to realize that FOMO is a real thing. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you have a 10 out of 10 A+ candidate working for you or even interviewing for you, and they need to be on a remote schedule, or they need to be on a hybrid schedule, and you guys are full-time in office, like, they're missing out on talent. And I think that there's just going to be a huge shift with that, right? Where some companies, and we've seen it a lot in like the real estate industry, where they just need to have all employees in office, or you see it with public CPA firms that are dealing with like high net worth clients, right? That come into the office. Like, you guys need to be in the office. Like, if there isn't any flexibility from both the employee side and the manager side, like, there's just going to be turnover. People are going to be jumping around, and there's going to be FOMO.
And there was a LinkedIn article or LinkedIn news article, you know how those are, today that I read.
Those things on the right side. Okay, yeah. Wait. All right. Sidebar. Can we talk about those? Because the articles, right? They have like a paragraph on LinkedIn, and then it's just a bunch of tweets. What's that about?
It's essentially higher up individuals, from what I've at least seen, who like, senior consultants, CFOs, CEOs, presidents, owners, all who post their kind of opinions and statistics. Gallup's just released, though, a statistic that I found kind of interesting, that 5 out of 10 employees are hybrid right now, and 3 out of 10, so 8 total, are fully remote. So 3 are fully remote, 5 are hybrid. That only leaves 2 remote capable employees working in office. Mm-hmm. And if 80% of your workforce is either hybrid or remote, no one's going to want to work in office if they can work hybrid. Now, of course, there are the exceptions. As you said, people whose clients visit the office and want to visit the office, people in real estate where they need to go on site, maybe. Obviously, there's some professions that really need to be on site or be in the office. And that's got to be your choice if you choose those industries. But I think that the future may hold where those industries are going to start to lack. Mm-hmm. And there needs to be some problem solving involved. And I think the people who are going to get promoted are going to be able to find those resolutions and those adaptive sort of ways of working in those industries. And that's mm-hmm. going to be the push forward. Of course, there may be a complete, backfire on the entire thing, and they'll end up back in office, mm-hmm. but who knows?
Yeah. And I think we kind of want to open it up too. So if you're listening and you work remotely and your employer is just dying to have you come in, but you just refuse to do so. I mean, come on, having to wear a pantsuit again. I couldn't even think about it. I couldn't even imagine. But anyways, we'd like to hear suggestions. What would you look for? What would you look for a reimbursement in your commuting costs? Would you come in office if they offered you 10, 20 grand more, right, on your base salary? What are the sacrifices that need to be made? Or is money aside, right? Is it mainly just the fact that you can work from home? That's just the flexibility of it all. You can't really put a dollar figure to it. These are the things that we would like to learn from our audience, right? This is why we're doing a podcast, because we do speak with hiring managers. We do speak with these executives. We speak with people staffing their entire teams, right? So we want to relate to them, if they're telling us, okay, the candidate needs to come in 4 days a week, right? We want to be able to provide some constructive feedback as to why that's not feasible. If we're interviewing 10 people a week and 8 of them tell us that they will not do in office for X, Y, and Z reasons, we want to try and gather as much ammo really for you, right? As a candidate, as someone in the job search, in the job market, to kind of go to bat for you and say, okay, well, this is what we're finding, right? These are talented candidates, right? Our team sources the top 10% in our market, and this is what they're asking for. And in any relationship, it's give and take. So we really need to kind of get more insight as to what's doable, what's not, and like the types of like perks or resolutions that can be made.
And I think that on the hiring manager side, you need to listen to your employees and hear what they want and really understand why they're asking for it. So, as the employee tells you exactly what and why they want to be hybrid or how many days a week they want to be in office, you need to sort of think first and then explain to them why their job needs to be in office, if it needs to be 5 days a week. And if there's a resolution where, let's say a company's currently 2 days a week in office, they want to come back full time, that's a pretty big shock for most people.
Yeah.
Going from 2 days a week in office to 5, you're essentially tripling their commute time.
Right.
For a week. And that's huge, because I personally think that most remote employees, and this could be completely wrong, there are some that roll out of bed and sign on, and others that don't. I think that one thing that we need to sort of look at is hours of work, because if your commute is being dropped by, say, an hour and a half, you're still going to sign on maybe 30-40 minutes before your start time, which means you're going to start actually working a lot sooner. And that transition from I'm home, signing on, to I'm starting work becomes a lot more efficient, rather than you come in, you get in the office, you're going to still take 30-40 minutes just to catch up on email, talk,
Yeah.
shoot the shit with your coworkers,
Totally,
have your morning meeting, whatever it might be.
your morning coffee. Yeah.
Your morning coffee, especially if you took the train into work, you drove into work.
Yeah.
And I think that, the opportunity for remote work to become the future is there. But also, I think it's very easily taken away from those who are working remotely. If you're signing on at 8:59 every single day and signing off at 5 o'clock every single day, then you're might as well not be working the same hours as everyone else. Because even if when we were in office, for the most part, people would get in, 2 hours early, an hour early. Sometimes, it changes.
2 hours early.
Sometimes people do it. And
Oh my
the
gosh.
thing is, would you rather drive 30 minutes? It's a pretty short commute. Drive 30 minutes, sit at your desk for, let's say, 8.5 hours, drive 30 minutes home, and then start your life? Or would you rather work for 9.5 hours and not have to drive anywhere?
Right.
That's I think the angle that people need to look at when they're looking at remote roles. Is you're not going to be working 9 to 5 in a remote role. I hate to break it to you, I really do, but you're going to be working 7 to 5, 7 to 6, 8 to 7, or you'll constantly be working where you're going to take an hour break in the middle of the day and then come back and work an extra hour on the back half of the day. And that's true flexibility when you're looking at working. And this is something that, people need to be aware of. And when you're interviewing for a job, ask them. It's okay to ask them, what are your remote working hours? Because for some companies, and we've seen it in the workforce before now, it's where they're flexible. And that's true flexibility, in my opinion. I'm like,
right.
That's what flexible working means, where if I want to work from 10 to 7 at night, or 10 to 6, let's say, 11 to 7, that's still an 8-hour workday, but I get to do it on my terms.
Right.
And that's the flexibility of work that people look for.
And shout out to the hiring managers that we speak to, where we ask those questions like, what does a normal work week look like in hours? What does a busy season look like in hours? And I've had hiring managers that tell me, like, as long as the work gets done. Okay. So that's like so important, because your goal is to get the work done. And I'm not saying the bare minimum, you quiet quitters. I'm saying like go above and beyond, check all the boxes, chit chat with your manager, build rapport, network, like you're on fire, you're doing a great job, as long as the work gets done. I think that's like so important for like managers and hiring managers to really like start to wrap their minds around, especially if it's not a client-facing position and it's more kind of like sitting in front of your computer, just doing your own thing, doing your own projects, asking questions when needed. Like it's not necessary to, and honestly, the excuse of like just having to show face is something of the past. And the companies that are acquiring all of this talent are the ones that are realizing that, where they're like, let me cater to you candidates right now and do like help you kind of form your own bubble of efficiency so you can work on products, be inventive, think of, different process improvements and identify inefficiencies and that sort of thing, right? Because even for me, like I tell everyone, I mean, I used to say it more when I was in office, but even now, like it takes me a while for my brain to preheat in the morning. I'm not a morning person. And I know like everyone, I know people are morning people, right? They wake up, they go to the gym, hang out, then they start working. But like for me, it takes me a while. And a lot of my best work happens after hours, honestly. So I think that just being flexible and adaptive to this shift in the past 2 years will definitely be telling, right? As to the companies who, especially if you are kind of being grouped within an industry, like if everyone in the real estate industry is requiring an office, right? But let's say one company or another or two companies say, you know what, remote work is fine. Like we were fine during the pandemic. Like we don't need to be in office. Like more and more candidates would almost kind of gravitate to those companies, right? Because it's not that they may be like large companies, international companies, like Fortune 500, glamorous, everything like that. But the fact that they're willing to be flexible is intriguing. And that's where you find people applying or, asking questions or inquiring about roles at this company, right? And just to kind of learn more. So I think that, it's definitely like a work in progress. But I think that like promotion wise, employers really kind of need to hone in, okay, how do we track performance, both for in-office employees versus remote employees? And how do we level the playing field? Because if that is the case where women, right, are more likely to be taking up remote roles or hybrid opportunities as a, let's say, senior accountant, right? And the only way that they can move up to controllership is if they start to go in office, you'll see less and less women in those leading positions. And I can promise you, all of the diversity and inclusion groups that companies are creating now, like it would be a setback for sure.
Company culture is the biggest attraction to any candidate that I've spoken to.
Yeah,
and
totally.
That was not the case, 5-10 years ago. When I was in high school, I thought I was going to work for some big company with some big name and, have that attached to me. Now, I would much rather work with a company whose values align with mine than work for some big company just to have my name attached to it.
Cheers to you, Jess. That's a good point.
That's, I think, where everyone is falling short. You don't need to work for the largest companies in the world to be successful.
Right.
And the largest companies in the world are combating that by offering remote work. And they're the first ones to do it. Meanwhile, Joe Schmo from the local, accounting firm down the road is still requiring his employees in office and losing anyone good, at least, to the big four companies of accounting. The Googles, the Amazons, the Microsofts that are all still working on this sort of hybrid or remote style, but offer the company culture of Joe Schmo's business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we lose women, people of color in the managerial positions because they're working remotely, we'll just turn right back to 1950 when it's only white men working in the workforce, and that's not what we want to see at all.
Yeah, And I think it's like important for employees to realize that, like the people making these decisions like don't want that either, right? Bad look. It's 2022. We don't even have to go into that. But but like it's not always up to the employer to kind of accommodate to the employee. Like you also need to be visible. You need to be present. You need to turn your camera on. You need to message your manager when you don't really have anything to message about. Like you need to be as present as you would be in the office. It's a double-edged sword, and we're not kind of targeting employees to do better. We're not targeting executives or hiring managers to do better, but like we're all in this period of change where we need to kind of tie it together and do what's best for the people and the profitability and success of the company as a whole. So,
right. And the one thing I'll leave our employees / candidates with before we wrap up is pick one tip that I have in a remote workforce that really works well for me at least. And it's something that's sort of done through a sales process. If you work in a sales job, you'll recognize this tactic, is find the one thing about someone. Find one thing you guys relate upon. It could be music, sports, hobbies, if you like hiking, whatever it might be, and connect with your manager, your coworkers on that one thing, because that may be all you have. If you enjoy EDM music and your manager likes EDM music, I know I'm picking a very obscure thing. Send your manager songs. As weird as that sounds, who cares if they don't like that song? You're still trying to build a friendship and a relationship with your manager that will one day come back on your yearly review and get you a promotion.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I remember like my previous manager, Ozzy, if you're listening, we would like literally just share food spots in New York, right? And like we'd get so excited talking about it. Like, oh my God, Mel, I went to the spot that you would love. Like, here are pics, here are the details. And then when I would go to a food spot, like I would share it with him. And I think like that rapport alone can get you a promotion. Like your likability, your personality, like people aren't really going to get a sense of your personality if those coffee break, what are they called? Water cooler breaks. That's so old school.
What used to be smoke breaks?
Smoke breaks, yes. So if those like don't happen, then you're not building rapport. You're not building your own presence internally. And people won't be able to recognize, like they can see what you produce on paper, but like your soft skills tell a lot about who you are as a worker. And this could be a whole other topic, but like just like a cover letter, Jesse and I create these summaries that we send to hiring managers before we submit candidates. And what's in a summary doesn't necessarily have to reflect what's on your resume. Like we try and highlight the skills that can really speak to you as a person, as, speak to your work ethic, right? Like process improvements, like, she was able to handle this, and this, increase profitability, saved the company money, this, right? It's not like I know how to do X, Y, and Z. It's like, this is me as a person. This is my work ethic. And this is what I bring to the table. And this is why I should get a promotion.
And we're not going to get into cover letters today.
Yeah.
But as sort of a question, it's going to be completely rhetorical. So Mel, don't answer it. If Mel and I, we're both employees, right, of the same company, and we both work remotely. Mm-hmm. If I, Jesse, don't show up to meetings that are optional, don't have my camera on, kind of just do, I'm a great person. I do my work. Let's say I hit every single goal, every single quota. I'm actually doing better performance-wise than Mel. But Mel goes to every optional training. She goes to company outings. She calls our manager and talks with her about her weekend and her maybe, life events that are going on or whatever it is, new music that came out, whatever it might be. Then who's more likely to get a promotion? The person who isn't engaged and isn't a people person in a remote setting, or the person who still meets their goals, not as much as the other, sort of person going up for a promotion, but shows up to the optional meetings, the optional trainings, the outings, the shares personal things about themselves, who's going to get the job more, or who's going to get the promotion more, rather. Just think about that. And when you break it down that way, I think the answer is pretty obvious, but I'll let you decide.
Yeah, totally. I almost answered. I forgot that you said don't answer that. No, I think that's like a great question to kind of leave us off on. And I hope that like everyone realizes like these tips that we're giving you, we want you to get the promotion. We want you to have the work-life balance. We want you to meet the salaries that you have been aspiring to meet and have been manifesting, right? And any feedback that we get that we can use as ammo with hiring managers, or even the hiring managers that might be listening, right? Any feedback that you can give us to kind of relay to employees the importance of actually physically being in the office will help, because I think at the end of the day, it's ultimately up to communication and transparency. And I feel like a lot of the times too, you really don't get that when you're so distant, right? Like I'm in Connecticut, Jess is in Erie, our manager is in Pennsylvania. It's like you need to build these connections.
I'm in Pennsylvania too, just 4 hours across the state,
Erie doesn't even count. It's like
it's practically Ohio.
Yeah, Jesse's in Ohio, so no, I think it's like really, really important to touch on. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how promotions pan out in the next 5 to 10 years, and how companies, especially like big Fortune 500 companies, are accommodating their employees, because a lot of the times like those larger organizations set the tone for the smaller companies that are in those industries. So I hope that like this was as informative as possible. And yeah, I'm gonna go make another mule. How about you?
I'm gonna crack a beer, but before, just a reminder, every Monday, including this Monday, Labor Day, we're still gonna do it on a holiday no matter what. We'll still have it for you. We'll be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Our video production will improve if you guys enjoy it, because right now we're working on our Microsoft Teams and work laptops with like 480p, I guess, is kind of the quality here. I don't know. I look kind of grainy, but we will improve. And if you guys truly do enjoy our content, we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. We'll be sure, actually, I got to add our LinkedIn profiles to our description on Apple, on everything. But again, feedback always welcome. Please, if you have questions, if you have comments, concerns, anything going on, we'd love to, integrate more and more of the community into our podcast to really get you guys involved, because both hiring managers and candidates should have a voice in this world. So
totally.
That's where we'll leave it.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it. And I hope everyone, by the time you're listening to this, Labor Day weekend will be over and you'll be back to work. Womp womp. But we hope that this makes the Tuesday commute either to your office, in home, or to your workplace a little bit more enjoyable. So,
boom. Second episode officially over. SEOO.